This video explains how body paragraphs in compare and contrast essays work by looking closely at a couple of body paragraphs from a sample compare and contrast essay. Now, as I've said before, the compare and contrast essay is similar to the persuasive essay in some ways, but it's not exactly the same. And one thing that is important for you in your writing process is that you don't start by writing the thesis statement, because in the introduction you can't really say yet what you're going to find, what the differences are between the two things that you're comparing and contrasting until you've really thought about what the differences are. So it makes sense in this case to start with the body before you write your thesis statement, or at least start to think about what the body paragraphs are going to say. So we're going to look at the body paragraph first. This is the first body paragraph from the sample compare and contrast essay. The first and most obvious difference between South Florida and Boston involved clothing. So I should explain that this compare and contrast essay is comparing and contrasting how people live in South Florida with how people live in Boston. I wrote this essay because I moved from South Florida to Boston, and I was struck by the differences between these two places, even though they're in the same country. This should work pretty well as a model for you in the essay you're writing, because you're comparing how life was lived before the pandemic to the way you live life during the pandemic. So it's also about comparing the way people live life, even though this is about differences in geography, not differences in time. So the first sentence says, the first and most obvious difference between South Florida and Boston involved clothing. As you will recall, the first sentence of a body paragraph that gives the main idea of that paragraph is called the topic sentence. So this is the topic sentence of this paragraph. And it states the main idea of the paragraph, which is there are differences between South Florida and Boston involving clothing. It doesn't say exactly what the differences are, but it tells you that there will be a difference. And then the rest of the paragraph is going to support that thesis statement. It's going to support that main idea of the paragraph by giving evidence, giving examples or details or explanations, explaining what that means. Somehow it is going to help to prove to the reader that this topic sentence is true. So, in Florida, beachwear is acceptable in almost any situation except the office. Beachwear means the clothes you wear to the beach. The beaming sun, the bright, hot sun, forces Floridians into shorts and t-shirts, flip-flops, brightly colored Hawaiian shirts, and you even find people walking barefoot in public. In stores, the bank, and city hall, people wear whatever feels comfortable in the heat, since the temperature is often in the 90s in the summer, barely cooling off at night. So now we have a lot of examples of what clothing is like in South Florida. Beachwear is very common, not necessarily if people work in an office, but in other places you will often see people in this kind of clothing. And so there are a lot of examples of what it means to say that casual beachwear is acceptable in Florida. Here are the examples of what they're wearing. Sometimes you'll even see people walking barefoot. And then here are examples of where people wear these things. They don't just wear them on the beach, they wear them in stores, the bank, and city hall. People just wear shorter clothing that feels comfortable. And then this explains why they do that. They wear whatever feels comfortable in the heat, since the temperature is often in the 90s in the summer, barely cooling off at night. So this doesn't say what people wear, it explains why they might wear that, because it's hotter in South Florida. Then we have this part of the paragraph. However, in Boston, even in September, there was a chill, and people wore long sleeves, closed toe shoes. That means, shoes that where you can't see their toes, unlike the flip-flops or sandals in Florida, and sweaters or jackets. This made everyone seem a little more formal here, more buttoned up, literally and figuratively. So when I say formal, that means they seem not so casual, not so relaxed. They seem more like they're trying to be neat. They're trying to be careful, more buttoned up. Buttoned up is an expression in English. It comes from people, if you button up your shirt all the way to the top, right? You have to button all those buttons. But it figuratively means people who are more serious, and they don't make jokes. They're more serious and formal. So I suggest that the clothing people wear in Boston makes them seem more formal and more buttoned up, literally and figuratively. So they're actually wearing buttons. They're not just wearing a t-shirt. And they also seem like the kind of people who would button their buttons all the way up to the top. They're very careful, serious, formal people. But this was only the most obvious difference. This doesn't really provide much new information. It's just a little bit of a transition sentence before we go to the next paragraph. So this was just the first difference that I found between South Florida and Boston, how people live. So let's talk now about how it's structured. We've got the topic sentence first. There are differences between these two places involving clothing. And then we have this phrase, in Florida. This is a signal phrase. It lets the reader know, first, we're looking at Florida. We're going to talk about one place first, and I'm going to explain what I mean about there being a difference. Beachwear is very acceptable. Here are some examples of what they wear. People walking barefoot. Here are the places where they wear it. And then here is an explanation of why. It's very hot there. Then we have a signal word, however, right? However signals a contrast. Words like however, but, although, on the other hand, words and phrases like that show there's some sort of contrast. There's a difference between the kind of thing we were talking about and the kind of thing we're about to talk about. However, in Boston, and here's yet another signal phrase, not only are we shifting the kind of thing we're going to talk about, we're shifting location. Before we were in Florida, now we're taking the reader to Boston to give examples of other things. People wore, heavier clothing, and we also have the reason, right? It was colder there. And then we have the effect of this, how it makes people seem a little more formal, okay? So remember that when you're building your own body paragraphs, it'll probably make sense first to talk about one thing, right? And then to switch direction and talk about the other thing, okay? If you're going back and forth between the two things all the time, it can be a little confusing to the reader. Also, remember to use signal phrases and signal words like in Florida, and however, in Boston, even in September. This lets people know the time that we're talking about. But the first and most obvious difference involved clothing. All of those have signal words or phrases that let the reader know, okay, here's what we're going to be talking about next. We're going to be talking about something similar or different, or this is just the first point, and we're going to have other points later. So that's the first body paragraph of this essay, and now let's look at the second body paragraph. Although many people in both South Florida and Boston enjoy outdoors recreation, the contrasting climates make different activities popular. So, here we actually have a similarity, a comparison, not a contrast. Many people in both places enjoy doing fun things outside, outdoors recreation. But, or although that is true, the climates are different, and that makes different activities popular. So again, this is the topic sentence of the paragraph. It gives the main idea of the paragraph, which is that people in these two places tend to do different kinds of outdoor activities because the climates are different. Florida is much more focused on the beach, and there are many more towns and cities along the peninsula's coast than in the interior of the state, right? So Florida's focused on the beach. This is a little bit of background information about the state. It's a peninsula, meaning that it's a piece of land that sticks out into the water. It's surrounded on water by three sides, even though it is still connected to the land, the big landmass of the rest of the United States. And there are more people who live along the coast than in the interior of the state. Through much of the year, people can be found tanning themselves on the sand, right? They're laying in the sun to get darker. This is, especially white people. Swimming, surfing, and fishing. So here we have some examples of the outdoor activities that people in South Florida enjoy. Even when it gets cooler in the winter, though it never gets really cold, people still surf, fish, and walk along the sand. Even if they aren't lying in their bathing suits in the sun, tanning, even if they aren't swimming, they still like to go down to the beach and do things like surf and fish and walk. In Boston, on the other hand, again, we have a couple of signal phrases. On the other hand, here's something that's going to be different from what we were just talking about. And we're moving to a different place. In Boston, cold weather prevents some sports while enabling others. Because of the weather, some sports can be done and others can't. Many people are avid skiers and snowboarders here. Avid means they love to do it. They really enjoy it and they're devoted to it. Many people are avid skiers and snowboarders here, and even families that cannot afford such expensive hobbies still enjoy pushing their kids in sleds down snowy hillsides, right? That's a kind of outdoor recreation people can do in the snow, but you couldn't do it in Florida where there's no snow. The attractive landscape of Massachusetts, which includes many rolling hills covered in woodland, also makes hiking a more popular pastime than in Florida. I didn't really explain it well, but Massachusetts has a landscape that's interesting to walk up and down, whereas Florida is very flat, and people don't hike as much in Florida. Furthermore, here's a signal word that lets us know here's another point. Furthermore, ice skating and ice hockey are both much more popular in Massachusetts than Florida, even though there are indoor ice rinks down south. So it's probably not surprising that people like to do things on ice more in Massachusetts than in Florida, even though it is possible to play ice hockey or to go ice skating in some places in Florida because they have indoor ice rinks, right? They have buildings where they keep things cold so they can have ice. Finally, here's the last item. I'm letting you know we're coming to the end of the list of points. Finally, people in Massachusetts seem more serious about their recreation, focused on exercising or covering a lot of ground, right? Like going a far distance, or seeing as much nature as possible rather than taking it easy. So this paragraph began by saying what the main idea was. Outdoor recreation is popular with a lot of people in both places, but because of the climate, different kinds of outdoor recreation are more popular. Florida is focused on the beach. We have examples then of what that means: tanning, swimming, surfing, fishing, and just walking along the sand. And then we have other examples in Boston, on the other hand: skiing, snowboarding, sledding, and then hiking is more popular than in Florida. Ice skating and ice hockey. We have a lot of examples, as well as some explanations of why something might be more popular in one place than another. And then at the end, we have sort of a new way in which it's different. People in Massachusetts seem more serious about their recreation. They're more trying to get something done, check something off the list, achieve something, rather than just kind of taking it easy, being casual, being relaxed, having fun. So here you have two examples of two body paragraphs in a compare and contrast essay. And the third one is it's really the same kind of thing. It's just focusing on a different aspect. So when you're working on your own body paragraphs for this compare and contrast essay, of course, you'll be focusing not on differences between the way people live in different geographical areas. You're going to be focused on the difference in your own life, the way you live between the time before the pandemic and the time now during the pandemic. So you're going to choose three criteria of your own, three aspects of the way you live your life, and you're going to compare and contrast the difference before and the difference now, or maybe some similarities. Some things might be the same, right? You can compare and contrast, not just contrast. It's up to you. And you're going to start each body paragraph with a topic sentence that gives the main idea of the paragraph, and then the rest of the paragraph will support the topic sentence by giving evidence, by giving examples, details. Could be a little story, could be a little bit of descriptive writing, could explain why something is the way it is. But you're going to support the main idea of the paragraph by giving a lot of evidence in the rest of the paragraph. And of course, these topic sentences go back to the thesis statement. They help to support the thesis statement in the introduction. So here are two topic sentences. The first and most obvious difference between South Florida and Boston involved clothing. Although many people in both places enjoy outdoor recreation, the contrasting climates make different activities popular. And here is the thesis statement. The two places not only have different climates and different landscapes, but also, as I discovered, different cultures. In Florida, the heat seems to affect every aspect of the culture, the way people live their lives, from fashion to recreation to personalities, making Floridians more relaxed than the focused Bostonians I found in the crisp autumn air. So this thesis statement was showing sort of an overall difference between the two places, but it focuses on three different aspects: fashion, recreation, and personalities. And we can see how the first two body paragraphs help to support this idea that Floridians are more relaxed than the more focused Bostonians. All right, so those are two examples from a model essay. I hope that helps you as you work on drafting your own body paragraphs for your own compare and contrast essay.